Hello, my name's Melissa Bradley. I'm the Program Manager with Water Sensitive SA. Today we're here for the course for InSite Water Tool compliance with the Planning and Design Code, looking at stormwater management policies and options to comply. Before we go too far, I'd like to acknowledge that today I join you from the traditional lands of the Paramount people in the Adelaide Hills, and we acknowledge the Paramount people as the traditional owners of this land and their strong spiritual and cultural connection to country. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. Okay, so I'm just going to give you an overview of the topics we're going to cover today. I'll be covering stormwater related greening policies within the Planning and Design Code. Then Ian Adams from Organic Engineering will be covering an introduction to the InSite Water Tool and how to use it for a stormwater assessment of a small scale development. And then he's going to take you through a series of case studies of common development types and worked examples of the InSite Water Tool. And then finally, Ian will show you how you can achieve a self-certification for your development application with the InSite Water Tool. Just as an overview, all of the policies that we'll take you through today in the Planning and Design Code address some key policy objectives in the code, and they're around reduced local flooding risk, protecting the integrity of urban streams, protecting the health of our waterways and the coastal environments that they link to, and providing amenity through greening. There's this really strong connection between water and urban greening in the code. Sustaining green spaces through alternative and water and passive irrigation, and then also reducing the urban heat island effect as a result of bringing water back into the environment. So those themes and objectives are going to run through all the policies that you see here today. So if we look at our approval pathways, you have two ways that you can submit your application. You can follow what's called a deemed to satisfy pathway, or you can have a merit assessment. For a small scale development, residential development of up to 4 allotments, using the deemed to satisfy pathway, there are 3 main areas in terms of stormwater management and related urban greening that need to be considered. One of them is a minimum landscape permeable garden area. The second is 1 tree per allotment, consistent with the planning strategies desire to have more greening across Greater Adelaide, and a combination of retention and detention storage tanks. So to look at the detail of those policies, you'll need to go to part 3 of the code. This is phase 3 of the code, and look at the stormwater management overlay and the urban tree canopy overlay. If you have a residential development of 5 or more allotments, then the requirements are slightly different and you need to go to a different part of the code. So in these cases, you'll need to go to part 4 of the code, and the primary policies are in the design and urban area section of the code. And really they deal with those policies we're drawing your attention to, deal with stormwater management and that water sensitive urban design, and then green infrastructure, canopy establishment, and how it relates to stormwater management. So again, there are minimum outdoor open space requirements and soft landscaping requirements to encourage stormwater infiltration, biodiversity and improved aesthetics. There are also minimum deep soil zone requirements, maintenance of pre-development stormwater runoff peak flows, and then the management of stormwater systems to improve or minimise the discharge of sediment, suspended sediments, organic matter, nutrients and bacteria, litter and the like to our waterways. So the area that the InSite Water Tool will focus on will be the part 4 policy. So the deemed to satisfy pathway is this, and it's a bit of a lookup table quite approach, but the InSite Water Tool deals mostly with these sort of with the largest, slightly larger scale infill. So that's going to be the primary focus of our session today. So just looking at this merit assessment pathway. So before I spoke about the to satisfy pathway, now we're going to talk about the merit assessment pathway for small scale residential development. So again, just to recap, we're going to be looking at policies around stormwater runoff quality, peak flow management, runoff volume management, water use efficiency, and integration of stormwater into the landscape. I did mention infiltration before, but I didn't mention permeable or porous paving. In the green infrastructure, I believe I've mentioned top 3 items there, but there's a 4th item about maximum driveway crossover widths, and the driver behind that is protecting the space in the verge for establishment of tree canopy. So with the soft landscape areas and stormwater related policies, go to part 4 of the code. There's policies around soft landscaping requirements, and I'm going to particularly draw your attention to the need to provision for stormwater infiltration. There are no deemed to satisfy pathways in the code for this performance outcome, but solutions do involve permeable paving and infiltration systems to meet that requirement. But again, you can meet them in many ways. We're just going to show you how to meet it with permeable paving and infiltration systems. And this image on the right, provided to us by Adbri Masonry, indicates that it's got a permeable paving driveway next to the landscape strip along the boundary, and in close proximity to buildings. And there are ways that you can provide treatments and waterproofing adjacent to the foundations to protect them, but it is possible to build like in this way. So in terms of driveways and stormwater, there is a policy in part 4 of the code that if you have a battle axe block or a common driveway, you must incorporate landscaping and permeability to ensure that it looks attractive, but to assist your stormwater management. So again, a deemed to satisfy pathway is provided in this case, that if you construct your driveway of 50% permeable or porous material, so either a porous paver or a permeable or porous asphalt, or the like with similar products, that is a deemed to satisfy pathway that could achieve you an approval. Then you also need to provide a soft landscape strip of a minimum 1 metre dimension between the driveway and the boundary. So as you can see in this drawing on the side, that strip there would need to be 1 metre wide. So in terms of why do a permeable paved driveway, in some instances it can help you do away with underground detention storages and pumps. So it could end up being a cost-effective solution. It can reduce your requirements for pipes and pits throughout this network, and then it also provides passive irrigation and root aeration to any adjacent trees that may be planted in this area in your other policy requirements. So it's a way of just getting multiple benefits from one part of your development. So I'm going to talk a bit now about car park appearance and how that relates to stormwater management and urban greening. So there's also policies in part 4 of the code around general car parking appearance, and looking at your vehicle access ways and encouraging the use of permeable porous pavers, infiltration systems, drainage swales or rain gardens that can really reintroduce water back into the environment. If you have a look here, there's a new ministerial standard that replaces the on-site retention ministerial specification. So under the new code, if you look for the ministerial building standard number 9, that provides guidance on infiltration systems. This photo here you can see provided by Andrew King of a medium density development. So looking at it from above down to this car park, and then zooming into it, you've got the driveway areas are asphalt, but all of the parking bays have been provided as a permeable paver, and then that water will soak through and benefit these landscape areas adjacent and significantly reduce the stormwater runoff from this site. There's a couple of other key policies around car parking and amenity that relate to this. So with a street level car parking area that are open to the sky, you are required to provide some sort of shading. And one way of achieving that shading is to provide trees integrated into the landscape, as the previous image showed you. And they need to be provided such that for every 10 car parking spaces, a mature canopy tree of 4 metres canopy diameter needs to be provided. And then there has to be a minimum landscape strip of 1 metre at the boundary, at the road frontage. So again, this is one way to meet it. You can submit an alternate way and have a merit assessment, but this provides you your deemed to satisfy pathway. So a few other things with the car parking and integrating green infrastructure, water sensitive urban design and permeable paving is that there's actually an easy win in car park. So if you can manage your car parks better with their stormwater, it takes the pressure off trying to provide these services, these functions either elsewhere on the site where your space might be conflicted, or forcing these matters to be dealt with off-site in local parks and the like that become unusable in wet weather. So basically, you can imagine there's minimal underground surfaces underneath such a large expanse of a car park. So you're going to have less conflict in trying to introduce these features than you would in a streetscape, for instance. So again, really easy to put in. And excellent opportunities to integrate your permeable paving, infiltration and garden beds. And on the Water Sensitive SA website, you'll find some more examples, including Fig Plaza, that just shows this car park that is an impervious car park, but it drains to a central garden strip. These bays are all free draining to the natural soil, but they are connected by a series of open pipes underneath permeable paved sections. So when it rains, this area virtually fills up like a big bathtub, and then it slowly sinks in and provides extra storage and extra watering for these plants. This image shows the plants in 2016, and then another photo taken again in 2018 by Oxygen, who were the designers, shows how well these plane trees are doing with this arrangement of directing the stormwater to this central landscape area. So really easy to do, just takes a bit of planning at the start of the project. So there are a few other sort of more general policies around environmental performance of the development, and they encourage water harvesting, options around green roofs and green walls, and then also looking at integrations with, there's other environmental considerations about solar power, etc. There aren't any deemed to satisfy solutions for these policies. So again, it's all merit assessment based. However, we provide you with a few case studies on our website that might help you. This green wall is on St Bernard's Road. You just Google green wall St Bernard's Road, it'll come up. This image adjacent to it is a green roof at Christie Walk in Sturt Street in the city. And then of course your standard combined rainwater detention and retention tank. So the bottom component of the tank being retention, and then the top third being your detention storage. And then here's your outlet to have the slow release from the detention component. Quite a slimline tank, can fit up against a property boundary with minimal impact on the development. So there are policies around runoff quality for non-residential, so you basically commercial industrial developments. They introduce, well, these are consistently policies that have been in the code for many, many years around the management of litter, oil and grease. And there's also policies around the physical, chemical and biological condition of the runoff from the site. There are no deemed to satisfy requirements in the code, so the council's engineering requirements will be the deciding factor on how you need to comply with these conditions. A typical requirement would be that there needs to be a 90% reduction of litter and gross pollutants compared to untreated stormwater runoff, and no visible oils and greases for flows up to 1 in 3 old ARI terminology. So basically, you need to contact council and find out what is the appropriate requirement for their for that region, but this is certainly what we would expect the EPA and councils to require. Okay, so the next one are some specific water sensitive urban design policies that apply to all developments and design in urban areas. So we have policies around the quantity and quality of surface water and groundwater, the depth and directional flow of surface water and groundwater, and the quality and function of natural springs. So there are no policies within the code for deemed to satisfy, solutions within the code, but you can meet those requirements in a range of ways, following water sensitive urban design principles with green infrastructure and the like. So there's lots of guidance on the Water Sensitive SA website about how you can introduce swales, rain gardens, permeable paving, infiltration systems to meet those requirements. Just while we've got you here, another tip about car parks. To prevent clogging of your permeable pavers in a car park, it's recommended, a bit of a rule of thumb, that your impervious area ratio to your permeable area is no more than 4:1 ratio. That's not from hydrological reasons, that is purely on a to minimise the sediment loads and clog your permeable pavers. So that's just a tip for designers. Okay, so in terms of stormwater runoff quality, there in the part 4 of the code, there are some sort of higher level performance outcomes that have always been in development plans around creating common driveways and stormwater management systems that minimise the discharge of sediments, suspended solids, organics, nitrogen and nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, bacteria litter and the like from entering water bodies. Now there are deemed to satisfy pathways in the part 4 of the code in the design section. So these are requirements. If you have dwellings of 5 or more allotments, you must reduce the pollution reduction for 80% for suspended solids, 60% for phosphorus, and 45% for nitrogen, compared to a conventional design without water sensitive urban design. In terms of a compliance pathway for that, you could use, if it's a larger scale development, you could use the model for urban stormwater improvement conceptualisation, known as MUSIC, or you could comply with self-certification with the InSite Water Tool if the site's less than 5,000 square metres and has no public road access. So Ian Adams will take you through a series of solutions that show you how you can comply using the InSite Water Tool shortly. Okay, in terms of stormwater management and flow management, in part 4 of the code, in the design section and the design urban areas, there are a series of policies around flow and volume management. I'm going to take you through the policies in the design section in 18.2. If you're going to create a development with a common driveway, residential development, and you need to manage your stormwater to peak flows, this is a policy that's been about in development plans forever. There is now a deemed to satisfy pathway in that if you're creating 5 or more allotments, you can have a design storm for a 30-minute design storm for the 18 annual exceedance probability event based on a 35.35 runoff coefficient. or you can retain the difference in the pre-development runoff volume for that design storm and the post-development runoff volumes. You've got another option there. And you also need to manage your major stormwater flows for 1% AEP. So they are one way to do it, a deemed to satisfy solution. So one way. If you choose a merit assessment pathway, you'll need to contact your council because they're with a performance assessed pathway. Sorry, language has changed. It's not merit assessment anymore. Performance assessed pathway. You'll need to contact the council and find out what their design storm is for their requirements, because it will vary from council to council. So this is only for a deemed to satisfy pathway. A merit assessed pathway must contact council and find out their requirements. In terms of compliance, as you have always done in the past, you can submit a site stormwater management plan at the DA stage and applying your preferred method. Or you can use the InSite Water Tool to demonstrate compliance with this requirement. And be aware that the InSite Water Tool does have the flexibility to use the design storm of the preferred design storm of your relevant council. So it's not a one size fits most policy as it was initially. To meet the flexibility of the planning design code, we've included all design storm options within the code, within the InSite Water Tool. So Ian will take you through that a bit more later on. I just wanted to acknowledge that in bushfire prone areas, there are additional requirements for rainwater storage for dedicated firefighting purposes, comprising of a 5,000 litre tank. So I won't go into that in a lot of detail. It's there for your reference, and there's a link to the minister's specification for design in those bushfire prone areas. But I just wanted to acknowledge what we've spoken about before about stormwater management is not the only tank requirements that you might have if you're building in those areas. In terms of minimum landscape requirements, we have a performance outcome around soft landscaping being provided between the common driveways and the dwelling to improve the output and appearance for people who reside there. So that's a new policy. And then we've got soft landscaping provided that improves the appearance of common driveways. So there again, there's a deemed to satisfy solution for that around having a 1 metre strip between your dwelling and your common driveway. And then there's others around, having soft landscaping between your boundary and your driveway. So again, it's one way to meet the performance outcome. It's not the only way. So you are able to lodge alternatives, but you will then have the performance assessed pathway, not the deemed to satisfy pathway for approvals. I just wanted to show you an example right now of a car park that in Orphanage Park in Goodwood experienced a significant amount of flooding on a regular basis around the central part of the car park that really rendered a lot of it unusable space because it's quite deep ponding in there. What council did was created a central infiltration bay in the garden bed that is not lined, so it's a fully free draining garden bed, and they built that around saving existing trees in the centre of the car park, and now under a storm event that water all is directed to this central garden bed, slowly soaks in over time and is benefiting these trees because they have less asphalt around their root system, and they're going to have greater aeration of the soil, so a better longevity expectation of those trees. So that case study is on our website if you'd like to take a look at it for future reference. Just like to leave this slide here. There seems to be quite a bit of pushback about trees under this new planning design code, but really they provide so many functions, and stormwater management is just one of them. that we really need to be encouraging developments that embrace trees and find space for them in the environment for not just the benefit of stormwater management, but for the health and the community and wellbeing and cooling. So as designers, we should be putting every effort into integrating canopy into our designs. I mentioned earlier maximum driveway crossover widths. This is, if you have a look at this schematic, the driveways are basically for a range of different allotment widths. There are maximum driveway widths, and I'll let you go through that at your leisure. But the main point here is that even if you have a double carport, for some block widths, you will not be able to have a double crossover. You'll have to taper it to a single crossover at the property boundary, and that is so that we can get potential to have the establishment or protection of the verge tree to create canopy. You can imagine if this was reduced by another metre and a half, you're really putting a lot more pressure on that that space, contested space for a tree roots to establish. So that there is a deemed to satisfy pathway around that. Again, it's one way, but I think this is one policy that is going to get a lot of attention, and I would not be encouraging anyone to try and challenge that policy, because I think it's going to be highly enforced by councils. So the guidance of the deemed to satisfy pathway will give you an idea of the expectations that local government will be looking for. In terms of deep soil zones, this was probably started to be discussed, probably more than 3 or 4 years ago. It's made its way into the code, and it had made its way into several development plans before the Planning and Design Code came out. I know Mitcham had them, City Mitcham. So basically, development facing the street needs to provide a deep soil zone. Dimensions are 4 by 4, and you need to be able to accommodate a medium to large tree. And this is where you don't, except where you have no building setback. And there are some renewal, new policy areas around urban renewal where you won't be required to do that, but they are quite targeted, and in the remainder of the space for developing in urban areas, that these will be required. So in terms of how that policy is rolled out, there's a series of policies around your multi-storey developments, establishing the deep soil zones, and really, again, looking at the site area, minimum deep soil zone dimensions, deep soil zone areas and dimension, and minimum tree size. So, I understand the state government is currently working on recommended plant species that meet these requirements. So, and councils will also have their own plant species lists that they prefer. So, in the absence of the state government one, I'd be contacting the local council to see if they have direction on that for you.